This case actually took place back in 2008 in Orlando, Florida, and at the time, it sparked a massive wave of outrage across the entire country. And now, 17 years later, it's once again going viral on TikTok. So why hasn't this case lost its heat after all these years? What makes it so unforgettable? Let's dive into the story together right now. But first, here's a quick recap. This is Kaylee M. Anthony, born in 2005, and this is her biological mother, Casey M. Anthony. The daughter is Kaylee, and the mother is Casey. In 2008, Kaylee passed away at just 3 years old under very mysterious circumstances. And despite numerous issues throughout the investigation, Casey Anthony was declared not guilty. As someone who's been a fan of Detective Conan for over 20 years, I don't believe this was simply an accident. To truly understand this case, we first need to take a closer look at the woman named Casey M. Anthony. Casey was born in 1986 in Ohio. To parents Cindy and George Anthony, she also had an older brother named Lee. Remember this family, because we'll be mentioning them a lot throughout the case. From a young age, Casey showed signs of being headstrong and constantly lying. In 2004, at the age of 18, while her parents were preparing to attend her high school graduation, they discovered that she had lied about her academic performance. In reality, she was failing a class and wouldn't be graduating. But of course, that wasn't Casey's most damaging lie. From 2004 to 2006, Casey worked part-time at Universal Studios. During this time, specifically in 2005, when Casey was 19, she became pregnant. Once again, she lied to her parents about her growing belly, and even after giving birth, no one knew who the baby's father was. To this day, that information remains a mystery. On August 9, 2005, little Kaylee M. Anthony was born, but sadly, her life seemed destined for tragedy from the very beginning. Casey insisted on giving Kaylee up for adoption, because to her, the baby seemed like nothing more than a mistake. However, her parents, Cindy and George, decided to raise Kaylee themselves. Casey continued living in the same house, but she hardly took on the role of a mother. From 2005 to 2007, she dated multiple men, even got engaged at one point, but eventually called it off. In 2007, she told her parents she was still working at Universal Studios. But in reality, she was unemployed. Instead of working, she spent her time partying with friends, using money she had stolen from her parents. The amount stolen was estimated to be up to $5,000, all while her parents were struggling financially to raise little Kaylee. By April 2008, Casey's lies had finally been exposed, and Cindy decided to kick her out of the house. They were simply exhausted by her endless excuses. A month later, Casey moved out and took Kaylee with her, and that's when everything began to unravel. On June 9, 2008, Casey brought Kaylee to her boyfriend's house. That same man would later speak harshly about Casey, claiming she was a terrible mother who regularly gave Kaylee strong sleep medication just to keep her drowsy and quiet. On the afternoon of June 15, Casey dropped Kaylee off at her grandparents' house so she could go on a date with another boyfriend. While at her grandparents' home, Kaylee went swimming in the backyard pool with her grandmother. This is an important detail in the case, so keep it in mind. It wasn't until the next day, specifically at 12:50 p.m. on June 16th, that Casey returned to pick up her daughter. George walked his granddaughter to the door, not knowing it would be the last time he'd ever see her alive. At 4:00 p.m. that same day, Casey's phone location data still showed her lingering in the area, not having left yet, but what she was doing during that time remains a mystery. At 7:54 p.m. that same evening, Casey was seen at a video store with her new boyfriend, but Kaylee was nowhere to be found. On June 17th, Casey spent the entire morning at her boyfriend's house. Later that afternoon, she went to her parents' home, and when Cindy asked where Kaylee was, Casey simply replied that the little girl was with her babysitter, Jenny. She then borrowed a shovel from a neighbor. The next day, Casey told Cindy that she had a business trip in Tampa and would be taking Kaylee along with the babysitter, Jenny, during that trip. Cindy didn't receive a single call from Casey, despite leaving multiple voicemails. When Casey finally called back, she claimed that the babysitter, Jenny, had been in a serious accident and they couldn't come home just yet. On the night of June 20th, Casey was seen participating in a body contest at a nightclub. Cindy kept pressing her for information about Kaylee's whereabouts, but Casey repeated that the little girl was with the babysitter, Jenny. But wait, hadn't she just said Jenny was in an accident and in the hospital? On June 25th, Casey told a friend that there was a strange smell coming from the trunk of her car, something like the scent of a dead body. Then, on June 27th, she abandoned the car at a parking lot near the bay. By July 1st, under relentless pressure from Cindy, Casey finally admitted that Kaylee was with a friend of hers, but she didn't know exactly where the little girl was. Later, Cindy posted on social media, expressing how deeply she missed Kaylee. From July 4th to July 12th, Casey was partying nonstop, showing no concern for her daughter's whereabouts. Remember the car Casey abandoned at the parking lot near the pier? It was towed and brought back to the impound lot. On July 15th, George was called to retrieve the car, and they immediately noticed a foul smell coming from the trunk, like the scent of decomposition. With Kaylee's location still unknown, Cindy reported the situation to the police and decided to confront Casey to get some answers. When cornered, Casey claimed that Kaylee had actually been kidnapped by the babysitter Jenny, but things got even more shocking. The police investigated and discovered that Jenny didn't exist at all. Yes, she was just a fictional person created by Casey's lies. At that point, Casey admitted that Kaylee had been missing for 31 days. And when asked why she hadn't reported her daughter missing sooner, she tearfully said that she had been trying to find her on her own. The police immediately got involved, and K9 units detected the smell of decomposition inside Casey's car. She was initially arrested for providing false information about the babysitter Jenny to the authorities. During the first court hearing, Casey M. Anthony was declared a suspect in Kaylee's disappearance. What made things worse was the possibility that this was a murder case, as investigators confirmed that the smell in the trunk was from human decomposition, not from animals or garbage. The search for little Kaylee M. Anthony's whereabouts continued. A few weeks later, a man named Roy went into the woods near Casey's house and spotted a small white object in the distance. Roy believed it was very likely a human skull. However, at the time, he was distracted by many other things and didn't report it to the police until the next day. Unfortunately, when the police arrived, they found no such object in the area. Described a few days later, Roy reported finding a suspicious gray bag in the woods, but the police were rather careless during their search. Eventually, they told Roy that it was probably just a trash bag. The case went cold for a while until 2 months later. In September 2008, when the police searched Casey's personal computer and discovered that she had been researching extensively about weapons, extreme actions, and even chloroform, a compound that can be used as an anesthetic. On October 14, 2008, Casey M. Anthony was charged with multiple offenses, the most serious being first-degree murder. Her father, George Anthony, testified before the jury and agreed that his daughter was guilty. On October 24th, further investigation revealed that a strand of hair found in the trunk of the car matched Kaylee's hair. The issue was that this strand had fallen out while the body was decomposing. On December 11, 2008, a man named Roy called the police again, reporting that he had found a small human skull in the woods near Casey's house. The police quickly confirmed it was human remains. The skull had a piece of tape stuck over the mouth area. On December 19, 2008, DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to Kaylee M. Anthony. However, too much time had passed, so the cause of death could not be determined. The tape around the victim's mouth strongly suggested foul play, making it a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation. as it might contain fingerprints or DNA of the perpetrator. However, this crucial piece of evidence was contaminated. During the forensic analysis, due to the lack of professionalism of the forensic team, because it was no longer intact, the evidence was too weak to prove anything definitively in court. An additional side note is that after confirming the death of little Kaylee M., George Anthony, her grandfather, attempted suicide, but was fortunately discovered and rescued in time. 2 years later, on January 4, 2011, the trial of Casey Anthony officially began. Casey's defense attorney was Jose Baez, a highly reputable and experienced lawyer. The prosecution painted a picture of a party-loving mother who was completely irresponsible toward her daughter. In contrast, the defense argued that Casey was simply a tragic mother. They even claimed that little Kaylee had accidentally drowned in the backyard pool at her grandparents' house, and that George Anthony had tried to cover up the incident by hiding the body. She even went as far as blaming her own parents. The next phase of the trial, which lasted from June 15th to June 23, 2011, was marked by intense disputes between the prosecution and the defense. Let's highlight some of the key points from this period. First, the hair found in the trunk did not contain enough DNA to conclusively prove that it belonged to Kaylee. It could have been hair from Casey or Cindy, as they share the same genetic lineage and gender. Although the hair was shed from a decomposing body and both Casey and Cindy were alive at the time, meaning the hair could only have come from Kaylee. This evidence was not strong enough to convince the jury, so it was dismissed. Second, the defense challenged the evidence of the decomposition odor found in the trunk, arguing that it lacked scientific validity and was based purely on speculation. Third, the police found a dirty tissue inside the trunk that contained a compound typically formed from decomposing fat, usually associated with human remains. However, the defense argued that the stain could have come from waste rather than a corpse, pointing out that fatty acids in food waste can also produce similar substances. Fourth, the presence of chloroform, a substance used as an anesthetic, was also found in the trunk. You might recall that Casey's computer history showed searches related to chloroform. However, the defense argued that this evidence was not convincing, claiming that the compound could have simply come from a stain on the carpet fabric, not necessarily from chloroform itself. Fifth, the insects found in the trunk were identified as species typically associated with decomposing bodies. However, the defense argued that these insects could also be commonly found in regular garbage, casting doubt on their significance as evidence. Finally, Casey's search history on her computer about anesthetics, weapons, and extreme actions was probably the most undeniable piece of evidence, since an ordinary person wouldn't normally look up such keywords without a reason. This digital trail strongly suggested premeditation, or at least some level of awareness about harmful substances and actions. At this point, Cindy admitted that she was the one who searched those keywords because her dog had ingested something harmful and she was trying to find a way to handle it. However, this explanation was completely contradicted by her testimony, since she was at work at the time and couldn't have done the searches from home. The only plausible conclusion was that Cindy was trying to cover for her daughter. After all, the evidence was presented. The prosecution insisted it was a murder case, while the defense argued it was just an accidental death with no involvement from Casey. The jury also lacked concrete forensic evidence to determine the exact cause of Kaylee M. Anthony's death. During the trial on June 23, 2011, Casey's lawyer, Jose Baez, brought up the claim that Casey had been abused by her father as a child. However, this accusation was strongly denied by George Anthony in court. George asserted to the jury that Kaylee did not have an accident at his house, and, of course, he was not involved in disposing of her body near his home. He portrayed himself as a grieving grandfather who was nearly driven to suicide by the loss of his granddaughter. This testimony added a deeply emotional and complex layer to the case. How do you think this detail influenced the jury and public opinion? Then Baez went on to claim that Casey's brother, Lee, had also behaved inappropriately towards his sister and suggested that Kaylee might have been the product of this incestuous relationship. This statement was truly a circus act of the century. As DNA tests later confirmed that Lee was not Kaylee's biological father, such dramatic accusations certainly added shock value, but ultimately lacked any factual basis. What do you think was the defense's strategy in bringing up such claims? Meanwhile, Casey played her role as a grieving mother very convincingly, continuously crying and wiping her nose with tissues in court. The trial concluded on July 5, 2011, leaving everyone in shock when Casey Anthony was acquitted of all charges. Related to murder, she was only convicted for providing false information to the police, resulting in a $4,000 fine and a 1-year jail sentence. However, since she had already been held in custody since October 2008, that time was credited toward her sentence. Therefore, just 10 days after the final verdict, Casey Anthony was released on July 17, 2011. The American public was completely outraged after everything they had witnessed, yet Casey was acquitted and remained free outside the prison bars. In a March 2017 interview, 9 years after the case and her first public interview since the final trial, Casey repeatedly responded with, "I don't know," to almost every question from the reporters. "I don't know how the little girl died. My father was watching her, and then suddenly she disappeared. I just don't know. I don't know what happened." Casey also insisted that she didn't care about what people thought of her. She said she was content with herself and still slept very well at night, truly deserving of the title of America's most hated mother. Casey was remarkably calm and natural when she said she could still eat and sleep well, despite not knowing why her 3-year-old daughter died. It's this detachment that shocked and angered many people, fueling the public's intense dislike toward her. What do you think about her reaction? Wow, that's quite a comeback. On March 1, 2025, Casey posted her very first TikTok video, announcing that she's returning as a legal advocate to help those who don't have a voice. It's surprising considering her past. Do you think people will accept her new role, or will skepticism and controversy follow her every step? Indeed, it is ridiculous that she did not clearly say what profession she is doing. Maybe she is becoming a lawyer. She still keeps mentioning Kaylee, knowing that people hate her because of the 2008 case, and she still brings it up as a way to attract attention. It seems Casey has been quite successful since her TikTok account, although just created and only posting 3 videos, has attracted more than 80,000 followers. All the posts have comments turned off, but it's clear that the public is still very curious about this most hated mother in America. Who knows what will happen next? Will this most hated mother in America have more lies to tell? And that's everything I've researched about the case of Kaylee Mary Anthony. If anyone has any comments or thoughts about this case, please leave them down below. I'll end the video here. Anyone who watched all the way through definitely deserves to be called an angel.